Yeah, I am so excited. I have come to the conclusion that it's time for me to retire and move on.
How do you get to that conclusion?
Well, I think a couple of things have happened. One, a couple of years ago, I had major open heart surgery, and it reminds you of how fragile life is. Also, I came here during a time when the city had some pretty serious financial problems, and it was my job to try to turn the ship around. And although we'll never be perfect, we've turned that ship around, and we're in much better shape than we are today. So I feel like I've come to a conclusion in the work that I was hired to do.
Let's go to that first thing. You woken up a couple of years ago, and that's a major health scare.
Yeah.
This job is not something that you don't have a lot of. There's a lot of stress in this job.
You know, I don't want to sound like I'm whining, but this job is unbearable. It really is. It's unbearable for a day or a week, let alone for over 8 years now. That, it's 24/7. Expectations are from anybody that when they call you or run into you at Meijer or wherever it might be, that there's only one focus that I have, and it's them, and it consumes everything in their eyes for that moment. And although I appreciate that desire, it makes for a very, very difficult life when you're trying to have a family and a home life as well. And so politically, we all know how there can be controversial issues, and politically, no one likes to stew in those for long, and so they'd like them resolved. And yeah, there's an immense amount of pressure. I have joked that you kind of age in dog years around here. So I've been doing this for 50 years, it feels like, to me inside. So, but yeah, and to give you an example of the stress of this job, the average tenure of a city manager in the city of Grand Rapids is about 4 years, if you look back at the 27 city managers that have been here. So they don't last a long time. Now there's a few exceptions, Kurt Kimball being one. I'm going to be the third longest serving out of the 27 with my 8 years. So I think I've done my time. I've done a fair share.
You talked about the politics of it. You have to run a large operation.
Yeah.
And deal with a board of directors that is elected by the people.
Right.
And that hire you or fire you. You've got term limits now, which will result in more turnover. You've got a lot of things going on politically right now. The main thing you're looking at is the police community relations.
Right.
Does that have anything to do with it? Does that have any bearing? You're quick to point out that you're not being asked to leave.
Right.
But still, you have to deal with that.
Yeah, the stresses never go away. We had an incredible financial turnaround here in Grand Rapids. So money is not our number one issue anymore. Now, I'm not saying it's not important. Of course it is. But it's not our number one issue. But other issues come and fill in very quickly. There are, between affordable housing and the decline of our street or our tree system here in the city, the decline of our street lighting system here in the city, as you noted, national events and community and police relations in our community, the whole notion of equity in general. This city has really dove into trying to understand how our policies, how they have a disparate impact on certain people. And these are huge issues that need 100%, 110% of someone's attention to really try to grab hold of. And I'm just tired. I think I've done my share of that, and it's time to turn it over to another person to try to bring in some creative ideas.
Not one thing in particular, but an accumulation of all those?
I think so. I'm going to be 60 here next month. I want to enjoy a good 10 years of retirement, I'm hoping for. And with the health issues that I've had, I don't know that I have a right to expect a whole lot more. So I recently went to a financial counselor, something I had never done before, and the counselor said, if you watch your P's and Q's, you can retire, and that's all I need, man. I'm ready to retire.
The police community relations situation right now, that gets a lot of headlines. I remember back in 2014 when you hired the new police chief, and you told me that it was the single most important hire decision you'd probably make as city manager.
Yeah.
Looking at that, there's problems there, and I don't know that you blame them on one person. Is the Rohinski thing worked out? Is it not working out, or is that have anything to do with your decision?
Yeah, I think, let me be definitively clear that Chief Rohinski, I believe, was a superb hire. I think he's doing a great job in an extremely difficult situation. Imagine when you come up, if you're Chief Rohinski and you come up to City Hall and you meet with me, and I kind of demand that we make change and we do certain things, particularly in the areas of equity and how we interface with the community. And then the chief has to go back and speak with the troops who think maybe just the opposite. And it's his job to move my agenda forward while at the same time keeping his employees motivated to want to do the right thing. And so I don't envy him his job. He works as many hours or more than me. He's working nights and weekends all the time. Anytime there's an incident this weekend, there was a march on a Sunday night, and he was working on it all weekend long. And so that's a tough job, but I think he's handling it with grace. And I think he is able to find that middle ground to ensure that we have a professional police department of highly motivated officers that want to do the right thing and even take that risk that they need to take to try to address a problem. While at the same time, he has been consistently meeting my financial goals, the 12-point plan, all of those goals, the use of new technologies like the body cameras. He's doing very, very well in those areas. That very soon now we're going to have a consultant who's coming in to really, in a very close-up way, look at the department, all of our policies and procedures to make sure that we are not creating a disparate impact in how we police. And although up here in City Hall, this sounds like a wonderful idea because we want to root out anything that's causing a disparate impact, that where we're not treating people fairly. But then again, if it's your operation that you're in charge of and you know that the city has hired somebody to come and lift every piece of paper and look behind every wall, well, you get a little nervous about that. And maybe the chief is a little nervous, but his troops are very nervous. Not that they have necessarily anything to hide, but the point is no one likes someone looking over your shoulder like that. But that's what we're going to do here in Grand Rapids. That's why we volunteered for a traffic stop study. Now, it didn't turn out, the results weren't as what I would have hoped for, but we're the better off by doing that study because now we know what the problem is and we can address it and we will eradicate it.
Let's talk about your job a little bit. If you were in the private sector, what would your job be compared to what it is right now?
I often think about the difference between the public and the private sector. We're over a $500 million company, so we're pretty big, at least locally here. We're not a mom and pop, and so those of people who come to me and make suggestions about how to run it more like a mom and pop kind of thing, I don't think they have an appreciation for how large this corporation is. Then again, I have people on the other side come and want to know, why can't I be like Lee Iacocca and work for $1 a year? We're not that big and I'm not that wealthy, so we're in a unique place. Even for governments in this state, there's really no one comparable to us, and there are only a handful across the country that are like us. But I think the real difference is, and you mentioned it just a few moments ago, Joe, is I'm guessing now, running a company of this size, it's probably very similar to the private sector. The difference is the board of directors. My board of directors are known by almost everybody that lives in this community. They know them. Some of them are friends with my commissioners. And these commissioners only get elected again by appealing to the electorate and doing what the electorate wishes they would do. That's far different than the private sector model, where no one knows who's on the board of directors. They're not accountable really to anyone in the electorate, that's for sure. They're accountable to shareholders. And I believe reaching a bottom line and making money is a whole lot easier than trying to solve community problems. It really is, I think. Now, I'm saying that unfairly. I don't have experiences in the private sector. But if what my main objective is to hit a bottom line, I already proved I can do that, and I can do that every day of the week. We can hit a bottom line. But solve affordable housing or help community and police relations, these are very, very difficult problems, and ones that we're going to take on. But it's different. They don't have that in the private sector.
Anytime we do these stories, kind of a staple of any journalist to ask, the biggest accomplishment. My guess is it was transformation.
Yeah, this organization, I would hold up to any in the country for sure on what we accomplished. It was literally a $60 million turnaround. That is, we grew our reserves from about $4 million to $32 million. We invested about $30 million into the corporation. And we did this with taxes that raised about $30 million. So it's really, quite phenomenal how we were able to squeeze savings out of our operations by making them more efficient. Now, the fact that we reduced our workforce by 500 people, adds to that savings, but there isn't a service offered today, or let me say it differently, there's not a service that was offered previously that we don't still offer. We do everything we did before, but with 25% fewer employees at a significantly lesser cost. And because of that, we are just so much more healthy financially, and able now to focus on those quality of life things like affordable housing and other issues that are vexing our community.
Well, having said that, and talking about your board of directors that
the
next city manager is going to have to answer to as well, are you concerned the next person may come in and take a look at not be able to balance the politics with the numbers correctly and kind of undo what you've been able to do? Well,
the notion of undoing is one that I've come to realize is probably one that every CEO is worried about. You work, your entire career to move an organization in a certain direction. You'd hate to have it all change in a matter of a few years. But I've come to reconcile myself with that. That's just the way it is. Everybody has to have their own fingerprint, and the organization's going to change, and that's good and healthy. What makes me nervous is not reckless behavior, because I think all in all, there are enough safeguards in the system. There are enough people here who have a say in the direction that one crazy person isn't going to lead us astray. What I'm really nervous about is short-term memory. As long as the people operating, running, the people elected to manage this organization remember what we went through in 08, 9, and 10, we're going to be fine. If they forget and we repeat those same mistakes over again and we start spending our reserves down. We spend our reserves down to just over 3%. You can't survive and run on those kinds of margins. So we need to find a way to remember what we did. And if we remember, then we're going to be, I think we're going to act with all due caution.
There will be a group out there that'll say, well, yeah, transformation was a short-term answer because you still got legacy costs that you have to cover. How do you answer that argument from some taxpayers who are pretty adamant that cities need to do more?
Well, although I cannot disagree with that, I would add that we did a lot to reduce our legacy cost. We reduced our retiree health care instantly by about 40%. And since that time, it's probably about 60% less than what it was before we started this in 10. So retiree health care cost has come down dramatically for the city of Grand Rapids. Pension cost, up until just very recently in the last few months, we have almost gained back all of the losses that we suffered through the recession of 8, 9, 10. And remember that the city of Grand Rapids lost over $150 million in just 6 months during that time in our pension funds. And you know, you don't lose that kind of money in the marketplace and make it up in a weekend. It takes a long time of slow, steady growth. And that's what, you know, the group that runs our pension funds, they've done a very good job in trying to return us to that. We have also, if you recall, with our pension funds, we have closed the fund to any new entrants except for police officers. All other new hires have to go into a 401, a defined contribution type of pension system, one that's very common in the private sector. We have the same one here now. And about half of our employees are in that kind of pension benefit. The other half that are still in the defined benefit pension, the one that caused the ire in some people, that will slowly go away over about the next 15 years or so. And I think that was the fair way to treat people. It's very difficult. Someone's halfway through their career and suddenly snatch away or change benefits. I wanted to treat people fairly, so we gave them, anybody with 10 years or less, we made some changes, but those who had more than that, we let them ride out their retirement with this benefit. Although, even having said that, we about doubled the employee contribution costs. They're paying 10 to 13% of the cost of that benefit in weekly payroll deductions.
When you talk about your toughest moments, and again, I would guess it's trying to get through 08, 09, 10.
Yeah.
Even though there's been some other events in the city.
Yeah.
A lot less control over those things, but was that the toughest?
You know, it wasn't even the dollars, because that's just on paper. It was the laying off of people, and I knew we had to lay off hundreds of people. We had never done that during my 30 years here. I knew we had to lay off police and fire. We had never done that before in my career here. And of the people we laid off, I knew almost all of them. I had people in my office crying because they didn't know what they were going to tell their spouse. They had worked here for 20 years or something similar to that, and they were crushed. They didn't know what to do. And you know, I said to my bosses, you don't pay me enough to have to listen to those stories and to try to comfort these people, knowing I'm the one who's doing it to them, because it's what we have to do if we're going to survive. That was by far, it's the emotional people side of the restructuring that, you know, I just pray to God I'm not held accountable for ruining somebody's life. And I don't think we did. A lot of those people landed back with us in other jobs maybe, but some of them didn't. And that was really, really tough.
So moving forward, you going to have a say in your replacement? When are you going to be done, first of all?
Well, what I have said to the mayor in a letter is by contract I have to officially give a 45-day notice, and so that notice is now been served. But I also said that I do not intend to renew my contract, which expires December 31st. So technically I could go anytime from about October 1st, and I don't have employment at this point after December 31st unless the city commission were to renew my contract. So I don't know an end date. I'm in discussions right now with the mayor. She is interested in having me continue. I'm not sure what my role will be with hiring the next person. It would be rather unusual, I think, if I had a significant role there, but I love the city, and there's nothing I care about. Well, I take that back. I love you, dear. I love my wife. But beyond that, there's nothing I care about more than the city of Grand Rapids. And so whatever the mayor wants, that's what I want to do.
What kind of advice do you give the person who sits in this office after you?
Well, if it's a friend, I tell them not to take the job, actually. This is a tough job. It's just not... It's not worth the life that you give up, the evenings that you give up, the health, for the pay. I mean, I'm not complaining about my pay, but this is probably the lowest paying CEO job in this community, and that is of a $500 million corporation. And so there aren't perks and benefits like some might think. You know, I don't have a limousine picking me up or somebody coming to paint my house or anything like that. I'm just a normal guy that gets up and, you know, in my 8 years here, I probably average 60 to 70 hours a week. And, you know, at one time I was consistently between 90 and 100. And I don't care who you are, what kind of super person you think you are, that wears on you after a while. And, you know, in fact, I was just joking with someone today that worked 40 hours last week, and they said it felt like I was on vacation, or I was working part-time. And you know, I've said to many management people when I hire them that I don't care when you work, what your hours are, but if you're not working like me, then I don't want you. I need you to work, you know, 50, 60 hours a week. You can pick them, I don't care, but you need to put in the effort, and it's just too much for anybody. So number one, I wouldn't recommend the job. If I'm going to give advice for someone who wants this job, I think there's one word that describes everything you need to do, and that's balance. It's balance between left and right. It's balance between political and non-political. You always need to seek balance. Whenever I have found I get into trouble when I go one way or the other a little too far, and you veer too far from that perfect balance point. That's the point where you keep the most people happy. That's the point where most interests are served, is when it's balanced. And I've found it's very difficult to do. It takes a keen sense of judgment and a keen sense of awareness to understand where that balance point is. But that's the thing you need to survive in this business, I believe.
I get the sense that you're leaving frustrated.
Oh, no, I don't. If I'm sounding that way, I don't mean to sound that way at all. I'm just saying it was a real tough job, and I wouldn't change anything. I would do it again. But you know, there's a young person that recently came up to me, and I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way for you to make a living, man. This was a hard job, and so, having said that, I've had the best moments that any person could ever ask for. You know, when we avoided bankruptcy, when we got our reserves up to first 10% and then 15%. And now we're at 25. You can't take those moments away from me. Those are just glorious moments. And with some of our employees who accomplish just absolutely incredible things, I would give direction and present a vision to accomplish something, and then they would far exceed what I would ever hope for. You're as proud as a parent, that your employee could do that. And that happened over and over and over again. So that's what makes you come back to work the next day. It's not all the hours. It's not the drudgery of unreasonable complaining citizen. It's when you get to make a positive impact on people, when your employees come together and do extra special things because they want to. That's what makes the job worthwhile. So, no, I love this city. I loved what I did. I'm proud as a peacock of what I did. But I don't know that, let somebody else figure it out for themselves, because I'm not going to recommend this job.